to another episode of Broken Families, where we host conversations on divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. My name is Andrew Folkler.
And I'm Barbara Pointe.
Right. Today, we're going to talk about, Barbara, your ebook, Erased by a Narcissist. And so, could you tell us a little bit more about what the ebook is and who is it for?
The ebook, absolutely, I'd love to. The ebook, Erased by a Narcissist, is one woman's story, my story of a high conflict divorce with obviously a narcissist. And it's for women who are about to enter or on a journey similar to mine. It's a book that was set with the intention of sort of informing women about to get divorced, what they might encounter, what they might be getting themselves into when they go down the rabbit hole of divorcing a narcissist, which is a very specific type of divorce.
Yeah. And I guess for those who don't know about your story, I mean, how long was your divorce? And
Well, it was a lot longer than what I had wanted, and it was very quickly labeled a high conflict divorce. And at the time, I didn't even know what a high conflict divorce was. I didn't really even understand the term, to be honest. But to answer your question, Andrew, it was well over 5 years. The total process took 7 years, but the active litigation was 5 years. So that's every day of my life for 5 years. And so in my life, that's one thing, but imagine in the life of a child where everything's sort of more exponential in terms of time. So if you have a 7-year-old, that's, well more than 75% of their life, 5 years. And my daughter had just turned 7 when I filed for divorce.
wow, it sounds like it was immensely and emotionally taxing. That it was just it was just draining that you would have to go through this for that long.
It's, I mean, it's common to have divorces that long. But I don't know if very many women understand that, yeah, it can be years. Divorces can take years. I think I was fairly naive, and maybe other women wouldn't be as naive as I was, but I thought we could wrap it up in a year. Something more like a year or months, not years. And also what was special, I think, about mine, so special, is that we were often in litigation during those 5 years. So it was a very active legal file. And yeah, I've gone through many things in my life, but this was definitely the hardest walk I've ever had to endure.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that long litigation process, I imagine that would just keep raising the lawyer bill up and up and up.
Yes, well, of course, as the longer one is in conflict, the higher your legal bills are. And if you fall into active conflict or active legal matters like affidavits, that's where your fees really rise. So that's a reason why I wanted to write the book, because the entire situation was devastating to me and shocking and crippling. And it was also, of course, this rippled down to my 3 children. So to be under such duress for such a long period of time on so many frontiers. So you meant emotional, spiritual, and then financial, and then parenting is kind of a high conflict file is kind of like a war. And a divorce with a narcissist is also like a war. And so a lot of warfare tactics were used against me. And it was very debilitating. And
Okay.
so I really felt that I did have to share my story with others so that they maybe could sort of avoid some of the mistakes I made and have better strategies to manage emotions in a war, I guess.
Absolutely.
Mm.
What kind of tactics were used against you then?
That's a good question. There was a lot of false allegations made. So an example, and false allegations are really hard and costly to defend yourself against. So there was kind of a race to see, if I could go broke, basically, because my legal fees were so high. And I think, sometimes women start divorce and they don't realize that they need funding to get through those professional fees until the very end. And as soon as you can't provide funding, everything stops. And that was a rude, that was really hard for me because my expenses were high every day for 5 years. Um, so some of those tactics were keeping the pressure on so that my legal bills were really high. So a warfare tactic that happened often was keeping the pressure high on all fronts. So high, on the emotional front, keeping the legal bills super high. So I had so many battles I had to fight in one day.
Sounds like it was trying to always keep you destabilized constantly.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was a lot, and it was deeply destabilizing. I mentioned false allegations, and those were deeply destabilizing and deeply wounding, and then deeply costly at the same time. So if you haven't gone through a situation where you've ever had false allegations made against you, you might not know how to manage it. And I didn't, and my emotions ran really high at the time. Very high. It was super emotional. It was very, very challenging for me to manage those emotions. And the false allegations never stopped. So it took me 5 years to get a travel order to travel with my children. And like simple vacations, like to Montana for skiing. We're not talking about taking them to, Lebanon or to a high conflict, place. To Disneyland. I could never get a travel order. And so that's a simple thing that mothers might think that they could get. Because my file was so high conflict, I couldn't get a travel order. And I was actually accused of belonging to a cult. And so this was deeply triggering for me. Like I was so hurt. And that hurt was so deep that it made it really hard to bring forward the skills that you need to get divorced. Skills like strategy, skills like managing your finances, skills like organization, personal skills like resiliency. The calmer you can feel, the more resilient and resourceful you can become. Because getting divorced takes a lot of skill and strategy if to achieve the outcomes that you want for you and your children. It's not a passive process, but a very proactive process.
Yeah,
So that was
absolutely.
why I wrote this little book.
Yeah. I
Mhm.
imagine that with those series of allegations, it just turns into this huge smear campaign against your reputation and your name, not only with friends and family, but maybe at work as well.
Yeah, I had always been a homemaker, so thankfully I didn't have to put up with that any issues in a like a traditional workplace. But I definitely encountered that at in the environment of my children's school, and that was difficult. And I encountered that a lot of gaslighting is a term that we use with narcissists, with friends and family. I lost most of my friends, um, severed ties with my entire family, and it was people felt that they needed to take sides. I don't know if I was prepared for that, but when it happened, I was I was deeply hurt when it happened. Um, and so I had to, over the years, process that hurt. The other emotion that came out for me in divorce was this incredible, crippling fear. I was just so fearful, constantly being under attack, legal attack, private attack. And so I had to learn how to manage that fear and process that fear. And it and so that was another part of it for me.
Okay. It sounds like then being, the mother at home, you would have probably dealt with other hurtful tactics, things like being called unemployable, for example.
Yeah, well, I think this is a common strategy or tactic that high conflict personalities or narcissists will make, where they will sort of project out, um, try to make it look like you're irresponsible or unstable or you don't want to work, lazy. So again, this is a lot of false allegations and gaslighting. Um, but again, if you're not managing that gaslighting in a way that you can process it and release it, you can take it personally, um, and start to question your own sanity, like, am I lazy, or am I unstable? And of course, all of the legal combativeness is very taxing, tiring, and aggressive. So it in itself is kind of ironic because it does destabilize you, or you know um, it weakens you. So
Hmm.
there's a point where you have to turn the tables on the narcissist and somehow take your power back.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and hopefully that doesn't take a woman years. I mean, you want to process the situation and get on to happy life. But for me, it's taken years to do that. And I don't think, from the case studies I've looked at and the women I've interviewed, that it's uncommon.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. What I guess what other tactics do they use that would, in a way, gaslight women and, in a sense, not only destabilize them, but ensure that the narcissist still has control over them, even though there's a separation going on?
Right, and good point that the narcissist always wants the control and power. So another common tactic that we see narcissists using is, she's a bad mother, or she's
Mhm.
not a capable mom, or she's not a good parent. And so this is a really powerful one, because it sort of hits a woman in her core, her core identity of who she is as a mother. So, and that one carries a lot of weight as well when you say someone is not a capable or good parent. Of course, there's always lots of, it's common to get a lot of name calling in court, but this was sort of deeper than that. And so there was allegations that I couldn't, properly care for my kids. And so that was, again, it was painful because that's all I had really done throughout my adult life. So she's a terrible mother is a tactic in the book, and it's a pretty common one used against women.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it just hits them at the core, especially for women like you, for example, who were there to build and grow the nest and make sure that the kids were taken care of. You were probably doing all sorts of things that were thankless jobs. You're out there making sure that they go through to their appointments and that they make it to school on time, they get their homework done, and that they're growing up with the values that are important for to be an adult. And then to come back and have someone tell you that not only was that not good enough, but then they're saying that you did a poor job. It sounds horrible. It sounds like once those seeds of doubt creep into your mind, it just festers and grows. And
And it's important, I think, to underscore that it's not just one time. So once it's written down in in affidavits, it's evergreen. It's used over and over and over again. So you're seeing those type of allegations over and over again for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. The first 3 years were the hardest for me, but seeing those allegations over and over and over again, it's just really challenging. And if you're attached to those insults, if you're attached to those lies, if you're taking things personally, if you're not managing the emotions that arise in that, that's where things can go off the rails, I think. And so just back to this, you're a bad mom. This is kind of a special trait to the narcissistic personality, and it's part of the bundle of narcissistic abuse. And it's just something that special that they do, and it's like a light switches, and it has a name, but it's kind of like the Madonna whore complex. So it's like when you're married, you're a good mom and you're a good woman, but the minute you ask a narcissist for a divorce, you switch over and you become the enemy. And part of becoming that enemy is that you're no longer a good woman and you're no longer a good mother. So that is that all or none thinking that happens with narcissists in divorce. So for me, and it was very confusing because I'm like, what? So now I'm not a good person, a good mother. And so it can, I guess what I'm saying is it can leave the receiver of it in a lot of cognitive dissonance because she doesn't know, I didn't know what was going on. And it just deepens and deepens and deepens through the system over divorce.
And it sounds like then anything else you were told that was positive by the narcissist, you start to doubt whether any of those things were true too, right? I mean, if one moment they're calling you a good mother, then when the separation starts, they start calling you a bad mother, then I don't know, were any of those other good moments? It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of have like you sort of start questioning everything and you have a new lens that you're looking at. So for me, I really felt like, who is this person? I never knew this person. It's like you're in shock, you're in traumatic shock for a long time. I'll just list off quickly some of the allegations that started off in year one, and I had to live with those for 5 years. And even if you disprove them, they're still usable material and they're still always there. And you know that one day your children might read these documents. So, um, it's oftentimes oftentimes men or anyone might be tempted to say things to gain custody of a child, even if it's not true. But they know if these things are said, it's going to secure custody. And unfortunately, the system allows for that. So things like drinking and driving with your children, taking drugs, being part of a cult, calling the police on your wife. I had the police called on me 6 times in the course of our first couple of years. So that's also like a fear tactic, an attack tactic.
I
I
mean,
just
those are some really emotional things that can be thrown at you, and no normal person would ever really do that. I mean, Bill Eddy says, was it one of those core behaviors of a high conflict person is, extreme behaviors that 90% of the people out there wouldn't do.
and they make you feel it. They make you feel emotional because you're constantly looking for the next attack, and then you're reading these things, these awful things about you over and over and over again, and then you're defending yourself to your lawyer and you're defending yourself to the other party and their lawyer. And oftentimes that other party, if they're narcissistic, they will attract or partner with a narcissistic lawyer. And that sort of really is adding insult to injury. And that happened in my case. So I felt like I was under attack constantly. And I was.
Yeah.
So I think that you could never imagine sort of the perfect storm that could happen when you say, especially if you're the one breaking up with a narcissist. It might be easier if they were leaving you. It's just having the foresight to see down the road, like through the journey, that things cannot be changed easily in the system, and just how much money it actually can cost to if you're engaged into a high conflict legal battle.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of money, I imagine being a stay-at-home mom, there might have been some attack on your financial skills or anything like that, saying things like you were terrible at money.
Yeah, and so exactly, and so that one was very common too. And so that again are sort of deeply wounding to one's core or identity of being responsible with money. And so
Mhm.
since in my particular situation, my spouse was the breadwinner, um, it was easy to sort of do that, to launch those kind of attacks with me, on me.
Gotcha.
And it's easy to launch attacks, launch allegations. Um, Not so easy to defend yourself because you're the one running around proving this and pulling
Mhm.
paperwork and right. It's easy to attack. It's just kind of like it's easy if you're a bully to be a bully, and narcissists are bullies. But
Definitely. Well, it sounds like what they're doing is they're creating these little fires, and you're running around trying to put out the fire here and there and everywhere. And by the time it comes down to actually getting some work done for for your case or for your lawyer or anything like that, you're just exhausted from putting out all these fires.
yes, so it was so exhausting on every front, financially exhausting, physically exhausting, mentally exhausting. And what I found was looking back, I sort of fell into a limbic resonance with the affidavits. And so I would repeat these in my head. Instead of letting them go, they kind of stuck in my physical body. So I would just have these negative thoughts that never left me. And I had to do a lot of somatic work to just stop that cycle and then prepare for the next the next round, so to speak. So if you're a CEO or if you're a business person, you might already have the skills to go into the boardroom battle and you might have the strategic thinking to do that. But if you've been, working in a position like a teacher or a stay-at-home mom, or maybe you didn't work at all, you might actually find that you're lacking a lot of skills to come to the table and have equality in what you're trying in the conversation. And I found, unfortunately, in my situation, a lot of um, prejudice or looking down at the role of mother. And so I just didn't find that that the conversation was equal, going up against sort of a more CEO of a husband, and the lawyers are CEOs. They're all power players. And so the divorce game for me was brutal for a long time.
I guess, what other mistakes did you make during your divorce process that, if you could go back, you would, you would tell your younger self, hey, don't make these mistakes.
Well, now that I'm working full time coaching women in divorce, I always encourage women to get support, the support that works well for them. And I probably could have reached out for a lot more support. Also, too, we can choose to put our legal bills front and center, but we should be allocating a portion of our finances for that support too. So I think most times I spent most of my money on legal bills is what I'm saying. And so to me, looking back and then also looking ahead for other women is just to remember to put yourself first and foremost, not last. I think is really important. So it's easy to talk about self-care and getting help, but how does self-care show up when you've made a really bad mistake? Or how does self-care show up when you're under intense uh, legal pressures or
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. And I imagine when you're exhausted from putting out these fires, the self-care feels like you almost feel bad about taking a moment for yourself because there's so much that needs to be done, or there's even more fires to put out.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great opportunity to strengthen your commitment to self-care. And at the beginning, for me, that might look like rest or um, a massage or something special that I got for myself after I made it through a 5-day trial or whatever, but to just really prioritize yourself first, even over your children's needs, because it's like it goes back to the airplane mask analogy, where if you're not in good shape, then you can't care for your children. So you really do have to put yourself first and foremost. And most of the divorce game for women divorcing narcissists is about getting your power back. And that can be really hard to do, even with your own lawyer. So you should feel powerful and supported by your lawyer as well, I would say.
Absolutely. Yeah, so what steps would a woman who is going through what you're going through, how would they get their power back?
Such a good question. Well, ultimately you have to be able to stand and speak in your own personal truth, and you have to sort of shift through all of the stuff to just come to trust your own truth, no matter what's being said about you, no matter what's happened, no matter if you've made mistakes on your file, no matter if you're scared to talk to your lawyer. And I had lots of moments where it's just, I would see my lawyer call and I would go right into anxiety. It was that anxiety ridden for me at times over the last 7 years. So practice speaking your own personal truth, even when
Mhm.
it's not welcome. Practice rejecting peer pressure. And just to give an example of that is, you have to, as a mom, and this is just my view, do what your gut is telling you and do what you think is best for your children and parent in a way that's authentic and true to you. So there's no band-aid cure. There's no one prescription that's going to be the perfect solution for you. So that's the path that you as a mom have to carve out, which takes and calls forward a lot of personal strength. Courage is key, and then personal empowerment to speak your truth to powerful people, to powerful systems. Speak your truth to your children, and that starts with speaking your truth to yourself. So it's a lot of processing, really.
I imagine boundaries as well, setting up those boundaries and not giving in to other people's opinions or the gaslighting that's being thrown at you.
So boundaries, that's another really good one. And yeah, boundaries is key. And so you're I ask clients now to just imagine waking up one day and having an entirely new boundary. It's almost like growing a new body part. And so, yes, women might have to create new boundaries through this process, and I did. And you might have to strengthen boundaries that are a bit wobbly as well.
I guess if you could go back to your younger self before you entered that journey of divorce, what else would you say? I mean, so speak your own personal truth, have your set up your boundaries. Was there anything else that you would say to that younger version of yourself?
I think looking back, if I had to describe myself, I probably would have always described myself as a faith as a spiritual or faith-based person. And what I came to see was when all that fear showed up for me in the divorce process. First of all, the fear of being with single or being without my husband, and fear of new family unit, and then the fear of being in this war. Um, I had to call on trust and faith that things would work out. And then I realized that my faith was maybe not faith in, not necessarily faith in God, but just surrendering and letting go. That was really hard for me to do. I wanted to control everything. And when you go into divorce, so little is in your control. So it's a process of learning what you can control, what's within your control, and what's not, and everything else you surrender. That took me about 5 years to learn, to surrender. Um, So as you surrender, you expand, and as you expand in your empowerment, you come to surrender. So those are another probably few golden nuggets that came up for me. And it was actually the alcoholic's prayer, and I don't remember what it is, but I know you'll know, Andrew, because you know everything.
No.
What is that? The Serenity Prayer,
Oh, the Serenity Prayer. Gotcha.
right?
Yeah. Um,
Was
God give me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the strength. No, God give me the strength to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I might have botched that a little bit, but
close enough. And most people know that prayer, and it's such a great, great sort of prayer to bring with you into family court. The wisdom to know the difference, really learn how to control what's in your control, and surrender the rest. Family court's just a beautiful place to do that. The other exercise that I did with myself when I felt like I was out of control, which women feel when they're in these situations, was I just made a chart, and I just went, this is what's mine, my part, and this is what's, theirs. And to me, there was, or his, whatever the pronoun is. This is mine and this is theirs. And it helped me to sort of separate that out and gain clarity. So when we gain clarity, it just brings so much more peace.
so one common mistake I know you and I have talked about this a lot in previous episodes is that a person will only look at the good in a toxic partner, and they will try and reason their way through it, or try and even emotionally work through it to try and keep the relationship together for all these reasons that we know are not true. They'll say they're going to try and keep it together for the kids, try and keep it together for the good times. We're fighters, we love each other, but we just have our moments, whatever the reason is. But they're further digging themselves into a hole with this toxic person. How did you come to realize that you were kind of in that situation, and what would you say to people who are trying to make those justifications?
I think when you're in a situation like that of abuse, intimate partner violence, narcissistic abuse, sometimes you take it all on and you want to try and change. You're holding on to that one little good part of that person that you love or that you loved, and you're trying to change that person. And so you stay in the vortex of abuse. But if you can just realize that you cannot change that person, it gives you so much more freedom to let go. And I think that was a big pitfall for me too, is that I wanted to say that this is wrong and this is right. And if you just and this should be this way. So, but really, it's amazing how little you can change. The only thing you can really change is in here, in yourself. And so that's another reason I guess I wrote the book, was you're going into a big, vast wilderness when you enter into family law. There's lions and there's bears and there's tigers, and you're scared, and there's not a lot you can change. You can't really change the system. You can't really change lawyers. You cannot change your narcissistic partner. You can just change how you respond. Sounds so simple. So if we can let go of what's right and what's wrong and just stop making those labels, it goes so much more smoother. The other thing I learned at the very, very end was what you give power to has power over you. And so I kept giving my power away. And when you become conscious of that, you can begin to sort of take your power back.
Those are two very powerful insights, especially that last one. What you give power to has power over you.
Yeah. And honestly, I see this as a theme. I was actually with a client this morning, And I said, what was one thing that could just imagine that could just work out and just change for the better? One thing that could really empower you. And she said, if I could get my power back.
And I imagine that first step to getting your power back is that awareness. And I really think your book will help promote that awareness and therefore help that woman who's going through through this high conflict divorce, and they'll be able to then walk through that roadmap that you've presented to reclaiming their power.
Absolutely. Even if you just come to know the tactics that I outline in the ebook Raised by a Narcissist, then you can recognize them when they're happening in real life, and you can just step back and observe instead of
Absolutely.
being inside the drama of it
Mhm.
all.
And to kind of highlight something that Carrie Gore said in our last episode, where she said that it's very common to see high conflict people following the same strategies, the same tactics. And like you were saying, once you know the tactics, once you know the playbook, you're able to then recognize that it's not entirely personal, that it feels personal because it's what they're saying to you, and it feels personal because they're attacking your weaknesses and your inner self. But if it weren't you, it would have been someone else and their secrets and their weaknesses. And so their behaviors are in a way kind of textbook. It's just something that once we know about it, once we know how to work with it, we can apply like the BIF strategy, for example. We can apply other strategies like that you've mentioned in your book to work through these conflicts and, like you said, take back your own power.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you can go into offensive mode, be a little bit more offensive rather than always running in defense mode. You can become a little more strategic. You can become a little more empowered. You can make better choices in the process. It's not an environment that, allows for a lot of mistakes to happen. So I don't think there's a large margin where you can make mistakes and recover easily. You have to really take one right step at a time. So the more calm, resourced, and grounded you are, the better able you are to do that. And it's not personal. It's such a good example that you just said. And we also use that example in inherited family trauma, that actually a
Yeah.
parent would still parent any child probably in a similar way, not just necessarily because it was you.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, so here's a big question for you, and I think it ties in with the ebook a lot, is what can women do to lead a better and more fulfilled life, whether it's either during this process or even after when it's over?
Wow. I mean, I guess every woman has to carve that out for themselves. But for me, the path is about being authentic, living in your own personal truth, and staying grounded in your own power. So to me, those are the three magical keys that start opening doors to enjoying life, personal fulfillment, actualization of dreams. And so that's what I'd say to all women to do. I think women traditionally have been trained to to let our power go, and we're such powerful creatures, women.
Absolutely.
So we might as well use our power to, instead of relinquishing it to others.
Yeah, I think that you are right in the sense that there is a strong cultural dynamic that encourages women to give up their power. And as we progress more and more into a more equal society, at least hopefully, as we progress into a more equal society, we'll really be able to see each other as either partners and equals rather than through a hierarchical system.
I agree. The key for me is empowerment, and that is really what the focus of the book is. the intention, and that's the focus of my practice. And I see that that is an area of need with women leaving abusive relationships too.
Mhm.
Empowerment.
I imagine,
How can we step into empowerment?
absolutely. I imagine, say, a woman leaving an abusive relationship, there's so much healing that needs to be done. Where should they turn to find that healing?
I think, you know, to allow yourself the time that it takes, because it is a journey, but you have to turn inwards. You have to turn inside for it, and then supplement that with the resources that are right for you. And also, it's a great opportunity to develop your intuitive voice, because your higher knowing and your intuitive voice can guide you through this wilderness forest um, of divorce. So if we're cut off from that, we're cut off from a lot of our personal power. I truly believe that was my greatest ally. I don't think I would have made it through with my children and my finances and my home and reached some of my goals. I didn't attain them all in divorce if I wouldn't have followed my intuition. And a lot of times I followed my intuition and others around me didn't appreciate my choices, even my own lawyer, but I followed my gut, and that didn't lead me astray.
Absolutely. One thing that's coming to mind for me is, at least in respect to what you're saying, is you have to treat it like a metamorphosis process. You know, you're entering in the fray and you're going through all these struggles, and you have to do what you think is right, and it's going to be very much like the cocoon around a caterpillar. You know, it's going to kind of, you know, like when a caterpillar goes into a cocoon, its whole body gets dissolved into goo. It just doesn't just turn into a butterfly instantly. You know, and there's that process of slowly changing until finally you break out of that cocoon and you've taken your power and you're able to take flight as a reborn person.
Yeah, it's a beautiful metaphor. And you've kind of got to do your stuff and you've got to move through it before you can get to the next part of your journey or your next chapter where you take flight as a butterfly. So you have to put in the personal work, the spiritual work, all of the work to get through the storm before you can blossom again to whatever that looks like for you.
Absolutely. I imagine, so you've mentioned doing like somatic therapy, for example. There's also journaling. We've talked about meditation in the past. And there's, I mean, therapy and counseling for those who wish to seek it, or coaching as well.
There's solution focused coaching where
Mhm.
you start to look forward, and it really opens up possibilities for you, like what's possible, and it opens you to that miracle that you want to receive, or to spots where you're blindsided. So solution focused coaching is more forward orientated. Um, and there's also just beginning to implement a gratitude practice in your life at a time where you might not feel very authentically grateful. And there were times like that for me when I would open up a $10,000 legal bill and have no food, and I didn't feel very grateful. But even in those very dark times, if you can just start slowly, 3 things that I feel grateful for today. And then lastly, I would suggest mindfulness.
Mhm.
So because we're so worried about outcomes in divorce, what's going to happen. If we can just stay mindful to the present moment, it can deliver us, you know, so much more. So a mindfulness practice, even a little one. Um,
Absolutely. I imagine the mindfulness practice will help people just in general stay mentally present during these conflicts, during these moments where their narcissistic ex is trying to start and instigate these different problems or starting these fires that they have to put out. And you'll feel more in control with that mindfulness than without it.
Yeah, it's really interesting that we're back to this word control again, because when you have a mediator or an arbitrator that you don't like, or they don't like you, or you have a legal bill come in that you don't want or you can't afford, or someone said something negative and damaging about you, or you're in a boardroom working out an agreement that and it's not going well, all you can do is just turn inward, become mindful of that moment that's showing up for you. So it helps you to surrender by calling in that energy of mindfulness. And then we start building a different energy dynamic of gratitude, peace, and things start getting better. We start looking more at what we're creating and creating better things with each positive thought. It's hard to grasp onto a positive thought at times when you're not mindful.
But the practice itself will help them ensure that they are able to at least help emotionally regulate throughout these challenges.
Yeah, it's deeply emotionally regulating because you slow down. And a lot of this conflict and trauma and conflict, it's got you on fight or flight mode, and you're so sped up. So when we become mindful, we can actually slow down to make better choices for ourselves.
Absolutely.
We really, honestly, we slow down to go fast.
Tortoise in the hare. Yeah. Right.
Tortoise in the hare,
Slow
Andrew.
and steady, you'll get through it.
Yeah, one right step at a time.
Absolutely. So, Barbara, if people wanted to get your ebook, where would they go to get that?
You know what? At a certain point, I said, why am I writing this ebook? And the ebook was written to give tremendous value to women. So it's entirely a free download, a PDF download on my website, barbarapointe.com. And you can download it for your phone. You can download it for your computer. And it's completely free. So it's hopefully a valuable gift to others. And
It
I'd love to
definitely
hear
is.
from people what their experience is with it.
Yeah, it definitely is. And, I've read it a couple times and it's a very powerful, powerful message, especially when you go into depth on the 6 tactics that the narcissist uses against you, especially in litigation. And there's so many other little insights in it that are just kind of trickled in that can really help you find that emotional clarity and that emotional stability, so you know that you're not alone in this journey.
Yeah, so good. You're not really meant to be alone through divorce. Thanks for reading the book, Andrew.
Oh, absolutely. It's a beautiful story. And I think that, at least from my understanding, as human beings, we learn best through stories. And through stories, we're able to drop in these little pearls of wisdom into the narrative. And then what that allows us as human beings to do is kind of experience someone else's story through empathy. And by doing that, we're learning the wisdom of somebody else without having to go through that harsh trial and tribulation. Rather than we're sharing those experiences, and not only do we feel more connected as people, not only do we feel like we understand each other better, but as a person going through this chaotic thing that we call life, we're better able to navigate our own experiences because we can look back at the experiences of others and say, one, if they got through it, I can get through it. Two, if they got through it this way, I can replicate that and go through it that way. And 3, if they have not gone through what I've gone through, but it's something similar, I can find my own way to forge forward. And that really is the power of stories. I mean, as human beings, we've been telling stories for hundreds of thousands of years, probably since our inception. We were, painting on rocks. We've been carving in rocks. We've been writing on parchment, all the way up to the present. Now we have movies and all sorts of things. This is a story in its own right. This entire episode is an episode about one woman's story, as you mentioned, and that is what really helps us grow as people, grow closer together, and grow more in tune with the world around us.
There's a really neat woman in my circle, and she says, stand on your story, not in it. And so by sharing and telling our story, we can witness, and it is very empowering. And I agree. It's important to tell our stories.
Right on. I guess, do you have any closing statements, Barbara? Any last pearls of wisdom? I'm asking you the same question that we ask our guests. Any last pearls of wisdom?
I guess divorce, pearls of wisdom. Divorce is a journey. It's not the destination. So all the other pearls of wisdom are in that little precious ebook.
All right. Well, you definitely have to go onto Barbara's website and download it. We will include that down below and in the downloadable document. And all right, and that is all we have time for today. Once again, everyone, thank you for taking the time to be with us. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel either on YouTube or through our podcast, the various podcast streaming services. Don't forget to use the downloadable document below to help summarize everything, and you can share that with your loved ones and help them deal with these challenging traumas and high conflict people and really high conflict divorces. We also will include a link below for Barbara's ebook, Erased by a Narcissist. Be sure to download that, give it a read. It's an incredibly empowering story. Barbara, if listeners wanted to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do so?
Barbara at barbaralapointe.com.
Right on.
Check out my website, barbaralapointe.com.
Sounds good. And if you'd like to reach out to me, feel free to email me at startnow@andrewfolkler.com. As always, thank you for taking the time to be with us today at the Broken Families podcast, where we discuss and help you find solutions to divorce, parental alienation, and high conflict relationships. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.